I didn't want to be a sister who taught, worked in an orphanage, or worked in the hospital.
I visited every mother house in Milwaukee, and I thought, gee, this isn't what I want. I want to be with the people.
When I got the Victory Noll, that was it. They lived among the people. They didn't own anything. They drove their cars, and they were in favor of the poor.
The missionary sisters came to our home. When I started to think about a religious vocation, I definitely wanted that kind of life.
The reason I joined the community was its emphasis on work with the poor and marginalized.
My pastor asked me, what congregation are you interested in? And thinking he would have never heard of this congregation, I said, they're known as Victory Noll Sisters. And he leaned back in his chair and he said, you could not have chosen better.
"100 years ago, the missionary sisters of Our Lady of Victory began their remarkable journey. They not only pioneered a new way to live and serve as women religious, but even now are impacting history as they engage with the future.
Over the last 100 years, we have been women who have been creative, who have taken initiative, who've been able to create something out of nothing.
We're a determined bunch. We're not afraid to make adaptation, to do whatever is necessary.
Our sisters have a great solidarity with the poor and the oppressed. Their heart is with the struggle.
They went where others didn't want to go and where others wouldn't go.
We've always worked with people on the margins. We've been quite concerned about social justice issues.
To be a Victory Noll sister, you have to have a sense of adventure.
They didn't have institutional ministries, big schools, hospitals, social services. It was very person-oriented. They found their community, if you will, with the people whom they served.
It was an adventure. It had to be an adventure.
The Victory Noll sisters trace their founding to two visionary and determined men: a Chicago archdiocesan priest, Father John Joseph Sigstein, and Archbishop John Francis Noll, ordinary of Fort Wayne, Indiana. In 1922, Father Sigstein launched the missionary ministry of the Victory Noll sisters, sending the first two members, Julia Doyle and Marie Bennis, to New Mexico.
John Sigstein had a heart for the poor and oppressed. And he saw Hispanic people in particular who were not at all being served by the church. He had this dream of a group of women coming together to preach the Word of God, to be catechists.
Father Sigstein chose not to classify these women as nuns or to call them sisters, which would have confined them to cloistered lives in convents. Instead, he insisted that these new missionaries be free to travel to remote locations, spend time with people, and shape ministries as they evolved. He called them catechists.
We're here at Lamy Station, where the sisters stepped off the train from Chicago and into this vastness of New Mexico. While they were on the train, they made their veils by hand so that they would be ready when they met the Archbishop in Santa Fe. This was the beginning of the first mission in New Mexico.
They came out west when it was really a very simple structure of life. We didn't have Catholic schools and we didn't have a great number of religious sisters, and we were blessed to have the Victory Nolls at that time.
They were were truly missionary in their approach and also in their zeal. They came into communities that did not have the best of everything, but they still gave of themselves generously to the service of the gospel.
I am standing in the Cathedral of St. Francis in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. Marie Bennis and Julia Doyle arrived here in August of 1922. They were met by Archbishop Dager and celebrated a retreat before moving to their first mission in Watrous. In these remnants of this house is where Marie and Julia came on August 10th, 1922. Christmas of 1922 was very cold and very snowy. So cold and snowy, in fact, that Marie and Julia didn't even try to go to the church until late in the afternoon. Two young women on horseback came and asked them to come and tend their sick relative. Immediately, Julia and Marie got up and left. Later, Julia wrote, "We felt it was more important to tend the sick person than to stay in the safety of the church and pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament, even on Christmas."
Father Sixtine had the vision for the congregation. He knew what he wanted, who he wanted, what we were going to do.
He did not want us to have institutions. He wanted us to walk the neighborhoods. He wanted us to really go and do the home visiting and be among the people.
For many years, the sisters were not addressed as sister, but they were called catechist.
We are now in the Church of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Ocatay, New Mexico. This is the catechist's second mission. In 6 short years, the community would grow from 2 members to 55 members. By 1940, we would expand from the Archdiocese of Santa Fe across the Southwest into the Diocese of Amarillo in Texas and Monterey in California.
Almost all the dioceses that the sisters worked in were mission dioceses, when rural communities, way out in the boonies, there you'd see a Victory Noll sister. That sense of mission was very strong.
We are now in Anton Chico, New Mexico, one of our earliest missions in the late 1920s. The catechists who came here so inspired the young women that we had several vocations from this surrounding area.
Many of these women were from New Mexico. They knew the culture, they knew the people.
I taught under a tree, I taught in a garage, I taught under a porch, in a kitchen.
Most of us had to sit on the ground, and the sisters had the Jesus and I pamphlets and big pictures that they showed. And they used the trees to hang the diagrams that they were showing us.
You always saw the Victory Noll sisters in the neighborhood, what we call the barrios. They would walk the streets, meet the families.
They were with the people. I think that's the most important thing. The sisters were with the people.
When we were called to go somewhere else, the people would take over the work that we had come there to do initially.
We were missionaries. We went in, we trained the laity, we gave them the skills.
Teacher training was a very big ministry of Victory Noll. The sisters were the teachers to the parents, and then the parents, besides teaching their own kids, they would also help to teach others.
So it was like working myself out of a job.
We weren't considered to be real sisters. That was always a bone of contention.
They showed some of their hair, They showed a bit of the ankle, Initially, they wore uniforms. They were not habits. And they were not to be called sister, but catechist.
Father Sixtine started the community back in 22. He was the director until 1938. But he was a dreamer, impractical in many ways.
Archbishop Noll was the practical person.
He was a businessman. He knew administration, he knew management, he knew finances. He was a very strong benefactor of the community.
He was the one who gave us property to have a mother house here.
Bishop Noll started thinking that If we were to become real sisters and be accepted by Rome, we had to do a different form of governance. So Father Sixtine then would have to step down and allow the sisters to take more ownership of the community. And so it was in 1938 when they solicited Rome so that we could become a pontifical congregation. That's when we changed our title. Up to that point, we had been Missionary Catechists of Our Lady of Victory. Then we became Missionary Sisters of Our Lady of Victory.
Throughout history, the Victory Noll Sisters have ministered with creativity and flexibility. They have consistently found ways to serve outside the box.
Districts were required to provide time for students to attend local church for religious education. And the Victory Noll Sisters made good use of that opportunity.
The school would let us actually have an hour during the day, and we'd have to go get the kids.
We'd have to take them to a garage or someplace to teach and then take them back.
At one point, we had a trailer that we pulled around, and it was kind of like a mobile classroom.
I was raised in East Los Angeles in a housing project. You got out of public school, the sisters would be waiting for you, and you'd walk to their convent where they had tents up for classrooms.
I learned from the Victory Sisters, the CCD, and they were very good to us. They even used to go to our houses and visit our parents.
I taught on the back porch. I taught under the trees. I taught in the basement. If we're showing a movie, we'd have to carry all of the movie equipment and set it up in the garage ahead of time, you know. It was very different. I had taught in Milwaukee where everything was laid out for me, and now I was lugging everything along.
We would go together, two of us. We'd knock on everybody's door. I enjoyed home visits because you never knew who you were going to meet.
I remember one occasion we received a box of food from the sisters. So you didn't see many sisters do those kinds of things, you know, get involved in the social, pastoral needs of the people.
A special place in California became known as Queen of the Missions and served as an unconventional convent and valuable ministry hub for the sisters.
In 1932, Our Lady of Victory Missionary Sisters came to Redlands, saw the Burridge Mansion, knew it was empty, and were allowed to move in 1937.
That was kind of their western headquarters outside of Huntington, where the sisters gathered to enjoy each other's company, to do their retreats and ongoing formation.
I was about 16. Sister Mary Matilda Spetter, who was an OLVM sister, asked me if I could help with the 5th grade class of CCD. She said she would train me. I drove myself down and looked at this place and thought, wow, there's nuns that live here? This just doesn't seem quite right.
And it was a mansion. It was so unlike the sisters who lived in these poor little convents among the poor.
Right now, I'm walking on water. Well, here in Redlands, this was our swimming pool. It's been covered over in the 1990s by a different owner, but when the sisters lived here, especially in the hot, hot summer, we really enjoyed being able to come into this pool. And when we emptied it, then we would have conferences here. We'd go down into the pool area, and you could fit at least 75 people sitting on chairs down below. Around 1:30, we would all get the cars, and we went out 2 by 2, driving all over this area. After our dinner, many of us would again get in our cars and drive all through these 2 counties in order to work with the high school students, but mainly with catechists, with the adults.
Sometimes traveling 50 to 60 miles a day and then drive back that 60 miles back to Redlands. I think that shows part of their flexibility.
The sisters were able to work out of the Burridge Mansion until 1974.
I'm still amazed at what they were able to accomplish. In 1949, the sisters had enrolled 3,500 and 84 students in 22 catechetical centers spread out over the two counties of San Bernardino and Riverside.
They were really creative in their own way. They didn't plunk in some video or DVD or live stream something from someplace else. They had to create it themselves, and they did it very well.
After Vatican II, we were given the freedom to choose where to go. So that's when our ministries diversified.
Our Mother General in the 1960s, Sister Florentine and Sister Justine, decided that we were going to become prepared.
We had a lot of sisters who went back to school. Every sister was given an opportunity to finish her BA degree and get a master's degree.
There was an emphasis on what are your gifts for ministry? How do they fit in with our charism, our mission?
Their talents were recognized. They went into positions of diocesan leadership, not only in religious education, but also in planning, outreach ministries, and administration.
We became very professional. We moved from children and formation into a wide variety of areas.
We have two strands in the community. We have a catechetical strand that many, many people know us for. Then we had this strand of social justice, advocacy, social service.
In 1968, the Victory Noll Sisters established a mission in Aurora, Bolivia, to serve and empower Native people, providing ministry and resources there for 40 years.
I was one of 5 Victory Noll sisters who founded Julia Center in 1990. It was for primarily immigrant women, mostly from Mexico.
We founded CASA 20 years ago.
Hey, how you doing?
Our mission and vision was to respond to the needs of the immigrant families. And now we are responding to the homeless community also. And we provide those services like a food distribution, or housing, or helping with the rent.
I was involved in a lot of social justice protests, but I favored the farm workers at the beginning. I could see the injustice of it all. They were working in horrible conditions and with little pay.
The sisters never let anybody fall through the cracks. We don't stop helping somebody just because they look like they're hopeless.
We had a wonderful pastor, and one day he said to me, "How come we ask the poorest people in town to go all over to get the services they need, and they can't even afford the gas?" And so I started to think to myself that people who would come to this center would be able to get whatever services they need. And the Murphy Center has become almost a state-of-the-art problem solver for people who are near homeless or homeless.
I believe in my heart, in all the years I've been in the congregation, that every sister has had a heart for the poor and oppressed.
In recent years, as the Victory Noll Sisters analyzed their demographics, they discovered several major issues that demanded attention. Talking, praying, and working together, they made bold but necessary decisions.
It's a milestone for us as a community to be celebrating our centennial. We are very proud of that legacy, even though now we're beginning to look at a different kind of legacy.
Where do you start? You start where you are, and you try to pay attention to what is it that God is saying to us. Not what do we want, not what do we think should happen, but what is it that God is asking of us.
It took a long process, starting about 9 years ago, to face the fact of our demographics.
Our land was a fairly easy one to do because we didn't want any more buildings on the land.
They've cared for this land beautifully for 100 years. And when they saw that Acres had the same goals, the same values, they saw another steward Another group who could carry forward the work that they've done. We're a nonprofit organization, and we care for land and care for the history that's been on that land. So this was just a perfect match.
The sisters are very pleased about our partnership with Acres. Why would we go anywhere else? It is probably one of the things that made the sisters the happiest in some of this transition.
We realized that we could not continue to manage our own healthcare center. And so we entered into a partnership with St. Anne's Communities in Fort Wayne. They bought and are managing our healthcare center.
They provide everything for us to be able to care for our sisters on the property, which was really important.
We realized also that we were spending too much money keeping up buildings that were not being utilized. One of our buildings was completely empty, didn't have anyone residing in it. Another one only had a handful of sisters. So we had to think about, what are we going to do with these buildings?
One of our sisters in the chapter of 2020 said, I would rather take the buildings down and return the land to God than to have it turned into a casino or a resort. And there was this drop-dead silence in the room. And then every sister started speaking about, yes, if we can't find somebody to buy it that meets our values and charism, then let's deconstruct.
The idea of deconstructing Father Sixtine's dream, the pain, the sacrifice that he had invested in the buildings. I used to go over to the cemetery. Father Sixtine and Bishop Noll are buried in our cemetery, and asking them, this was your dream, and I sure do not want it to turn into nothing, So I think you got to do something about this.
We had written a letter, sent it out to our stakeholders and said, we have tried, we've spent 3 years trying, and there is nobody. So we will start the process to deconstruct. And a new mayor contacted Sister Mary Jo and asked if we would entertain one more thought.
In June of 2020, we had our first meeting, and we thought we might have scared the sisters off because we told them the good and the bad and the ugly of community corrections. And within the same week, we got an invitation to come back from the leadership team.
By the end of that meeting, I knew in my heart that this is what we had to do, that this aligned so well with what Father Sixtine would have done.
What was needed 100 years ago was to attend to those who are poorest first. Always prefer them. Where are the needs today?
There was this wonderful opportunity to provide a center for people who needed help with drug rehabilitation.
The buildings will be used for housing men who have been convicted of some misdemeanor of drug use.
It's thrilling to me to think that we were able to give up our buildings so that new life could come to these men. So that's the rejoicing that balances the letting go.
We had to let go, for sure. But at the same time, I'm not really sad because God has taken care of us.
We have sold all our buildings to Huntingdon County. We have a leaseback contract with the county to continue to live in St. Joseph's building for as long as we need the building.
We also retain 2.1 acres, which is the Victory Knoll Cemetery, that we will hold on to until the last sister dies.
It's a very sacred place of reflection of our history, of our lives.
Builder of bridges who calls us to new life.
The sisters have also chosen to share their financial assets with deserving organizations and initiatives in alignment with their own charism and missionary spirit.
Our sisters lived simply, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that we have resources now, because we were a very poor community for many years.
There was lots of times when we had to have credit from the grocery store, and now all of a sudden we find ourselves with an abundance.
The Victory Knolls are very much a missionary group. They're saying the work needs to go on. We won't be here to do it, but we're passing it on to other people.
The Victory Knoll sisters have this
wonderful history of working within the Hispanic community long before Vatican II.
Oblate is doing what we did when we were able to do it. And now we're able to support Oblate to continue that ministry.
If there's anything that happens at Oblate School that mirrors what the sisters have been doing, it's the Instituto de Formación Pastoral, the Institute of Pastoral Formation. This is a marvelous, absolutely incredible gift that they've given us. And so we say, thank you for your graciousness. Thank you for the gift you are to the church and the gift you are to OST.
We also chose the Catholic Climate Covenant.
Victory Noll Sisters were founded to go to the toughest places and do the toughest work. And the toughest thing that we're facing, I believe, is this issue of climate change and environmental degradation. That they would give us a legacy gift to continue this work, which is going to be some of the toughest work in the toughest places going forward. And we're just so delighted that they see that and that they're willing to give us a hand.
One of our other legacy gifts is the Heritage and Research Center at St. Mary's, which is a collaborative of women's congregations to have our archives in a place to preserve it, and we can have our part of the larger story of Catholicism told.
And there are several other groups serving women in need, children in need, immigration, trafficking, and work that's needed around systemic racism. Our sisters are very proud of these gifts that we're giving.
To leave that kind of legacy, especially to the lost and the little, the least and the last. That's where they want to leave their imprint.
There's not a sense of sadness. There is a sense of awareness that this is the next step.
I have no doubt that the seeds they're planting are going to bear tremendous fruit.
We are among some of the first congregations who are having to make these radical changes. And we feel that what we have done has been done well.
The sisters also realized that they needed to address the issue of their own internal governance.
Because we have become so few in number, we've run out of sisters able and willing to be our leaders. And so we're moving to a different way of selecting a leader from another community.
A commissary is a person who is commissioned by Rome in the name of the Holy Father to serve as the major superior for the Victory Noll Sisters. We invited 3 congregations to discern with us for a year about their willingness to serve as a commissary. And we have recommended the Sisters of Providence from Terre Haute, Indiana.
I'm really humbled by the opportunity. I admire the courage of the Victory Noll community. They have not denied the sense of loss that they feel, but they've also been so good about establishing ways in which the legacy can continue into the future. It's a great gift to be able to be part of that journey with them. It's a great model for the rest of religious life.
Blessed are you who believe.
Since their earliest humble beginnings in New Mexico, the Victory Noll Sisters have served the church in far-flung locations, always seeking out the poor, the underserved, those on the margins. As the sisters celebrate 100 years and transition to the completion of their mission, they look back with gratitude and look forward with peace.
The minute I walked in was just, this is it. This is where I belong. My whole time as a Victory Noll sister was to fall in love with the people.
I'm so grateful for the way we have worked in so many different places with so many different people.
Once you learn to love the people, the place doesn't really matter. It's the people that hold your heart.
In you the humble exalt, in you the poor are made glad, the rich and the proud are brought low. Blessed are you who believe.
Our Lady of Victory, ask your divine Son to send the Spirit of love into our hearts.
O Jesus, Father of the poor, O Mary, Mother of the afflicted and neglected,
Give us a great love for the poor, so dear to your sacred hearts.
so that all peoples will be brought to the glory of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Tú eres la